Hey everybody, it's Ron from Ron's Computer Videos. Heck, you guys know the drill. Um, Something that happened recently that I thought was really neat is a bunch of people came out of the woodwork to kind of express their love for an early accessory for the Macintosh computer, which was the Thunderscan. Which, if you're not familiar with it, the Thunderscan is a scanner that utilizes the image writer to basically move a little optical pickup across the piece of paper. And it competed at a $200 price point. It competed with scanners that were much more expensive. And kind of in the burgeoning days of desktop publishing on the Macintosh, it made sense to have a cheap solution like this, maybe in your arsenal. And I was very, very lucky when I was a young person because the school that I attended actually had one of these. So we could scan things, and it took for literal ever to scan stuff, but it was still really, really neat to be able to kind of import something into the computer that then you could manipulate, which was kind of what attracted a lot of people to the Macintosh in the first place. Let's head over to the web for a second. I know there's a lot of people making videos and fun stuff about this recently, but I absolutely wanted to make sure that I made mention of this MacGUI article because, man, there are some really great scans of the box art and the actual hardware itself, and it just and how it plugged into an Image Writer 1 and what the scanner software actually looked like itself. So it's pretty neat, but the part of this that often gets overlooked is that our good buddy Andy Hertzfeld was the person that wrote the software for this device. And he's got a great article over on his website, folklore.org, and I thought maybe we would read that together today. If nothing else, it gets me a little bit of voiceover practice. And if nothing else, maybe we can just enjoy this together as friends. So let's see. The first project that I worked on for Apple after starting in August of 1979 was writing low-level software for the Silent Type printer, a cute, inexpensive thermal printer for the Apple II that was based on technology licensed from a local company named Trimcom. In typical Apple fashion, we improved on Trimcom's design by replacing their relatively expensive controller board with a much simpler one that relied on the microprocessor of the Apple II to do much of the dirty work. The only other engineer working on the project was Victor Bull, who was the hardware designer and also the project leader. Vic was smart, taciturn, and easy to work with, and I learned a lot from him about how thermal printers worked, as well as how things worked at Apple. We finished the project quickly, and the Silent Type shipped in November of 1979, less than 4 months after we began working on it. In May of 1984, during my leave of absence from Apple, I received a phone call from Victor Bull, who I hadn't heard from in a couple of years. He left Apple more than a year ago to work with his friend Tom Petrie at a tiny company based in Orinda named Thunderware. They sold a single product called Thunderclock, an inexpensive calendar clock card for the Apple II. Victor said that he thought that I might be interested in writing software for an exciting, clever new product that Thunderware was developing for Macintosh, but he refused to describe it over the phone. He invited me to come visit him and check it out. In early June, I drove up to Thunderware's office in Orinda, which was about an hour's drive from my home in Palo Alto. After I arrived at their modest headquarters, Vic introduced me to his partner Tom Petrie, and I signed a non-disclosure agreement before they ushered me into a back room to see their demo. The most popular printer for both Apple II and Macintosh was the Image Writer, a $500 dot matrix printer capable of rendering bitmap graphics that was designed and manufactured by Japanese company C-Ito Electronics and marketed by Apple. Virtually every Macintosh owner purchased an Image Writer since it was the only printer that was supported by Apple. Tom's demo consisted of an Image Writer printer hooked up to an Apple II that at first glance appeared to be busily printing away. But when I looked closer, I noticed that instead of blank paper, there was a glossy photograph of a cat threaded through the printer's platen, and the printer's black plastic ribbon cartridge was missing, replaced by a makeshift contraption containing an optical sensing device that trailed an umbilical cord back to the Apple II. Their potential new product, Thunderscan, was a low-cost way to temporarily turn an Image Writer printer into a high-resolution scanner by replacing the ribbon cartridge with an optical sensor and writing some clever software. Since the resolution was determined by the precision of the printer's stepper motors, which had to be very accurate in order to print detailed graphics, the Thunderscan, priced at under $200, had better resolution than flatbed scanners costing more than 10 times as much. I loved the cleverness of the ingenious concept, and the Woz-like elegance of saving money and adding flexibility by doing everything in software. But there were also a few problems. The biggest problem was that the Thunderscan could only capture one scan line's worth of data on each pass of the printhead, which made it 9 times slower than regular printing, since the printhead could deposit 9 dots at a time. This made for frustratingly slow scanning, often taking over an hour to scan a full page at the highest resolution. Thunderscan was never going to win any races. Another apparent problem was the disappointingly low quality of the image being captured and displayed by Tom Petrie's Apple II application. Tom and Vic said that their scanner was capable of capturing up to 32 different levels of light intensity, but both the Apple II in high-res mode and the Macintosh only had 1 bit per pixel to display, so the software had to simulate grayscales using a pattern of black and white dots. It looked like Tom was using a simple threshold algorithm to do the rendering, which threw away most of the grayscale information and made the resulting image look unacceptably blotchy. It was hard to tell if the quality promised by Tom and Vic was there or not. Tom and Vic proposed to hire me to write Macintosh software for the Thunderscan. I knew that a low-cost scanner would be a great product for the image-hungry Macintosh, but only if it had sufficient quality, and I wasn't sure about that. I told them I'd think it over during the next few days, and as I did, I became more excited about the potential of Thunderscan for Macintosh, realizing that the slow speed wouldn't be as much of an impediment if the quality and resolution was good enough. The low image quality in Tom's prototype was probably caused more by the Apple II software than by anything inherent in the scanner. The Macintosh was almost 10 times faster than the Apple II, so it would be able to sample the incoming data better to obtain more horizontal resolution. Plus, I knew a much better algorithm for grayscale rendering that would be fun to try out in practice. My friend and colleague Bill Atkinson was a talented photographer, and one of his hobbies was playing around with digitized pictures, periodically experimenting to find the best algorithms for rendering them. Bill loved to explain his current work to whoever would listen to him, so I learned a lot about rendering grayscale images over the years simply by being around him. Bill had progressed over the years from using a order-dithered algorithm, where varying threshold values were specified in a sliding matrix, to his current favorite, which was a modified version that would be known as Floyd-Steinberg algorithm, where an error term is maintained and distributed proportionally to neighboring pixels. I called Thunderware and told them I was interested in working on Macintosh software for Thunderscan in exchange for a per-unit royalty. I drove back to Orinda where Tom and Vic gave me lots of documentation about the scanner, and the sample code that Tom had written for Apple II. For the next few months, I drove up to Orinda once a week, usually on Thursday, to meet with Tom and Vic and show them my progress, prioritize development issues, and discuss various complications as they arose. We would also discuss business terms, but we didn't sign a formal contract until the software was almost finished, when we settled on a royalty of $7.50 per unit. Tom and Vic had already encountered and surmounted a number of tough problems just to get scanning going at all. For example, the ImageWriter printer was not really designed to be stepped one scan line at a time, and if you tried that, the paper would bunch up against the platen, causing distortion. Tom and Vic solved this problem by commanding the printer to move 3 steps up and then 2 steps back instead of a single step up, which held the paper snugly against the platen as required. There were also various techniques for sensing the beginning and the end of the scan line, and some timings that were determined by tedious experimentation on how long it took the printer to respond to a command. It took a week or so to get the basic scanning working for Macintosh, and then a few more days to render the grayscale data with Bill's modified Floyd-Steinberg dithering. After shaking out a variety of problems, mostly involving synchronization between the printer and the software, I was surprised and impressed by the consistent high quality of the results. I went through a brief, elated phase of scanning every image in sight that would fit through the printer, just to see how it would turn out. One important design decision that I made early on was to keep the grayscale data around to allow more flexible image processing. Thunderscan documents were 5 bits per pixel, before the Macintosh generally supported grayscale, and the user could manipulate the contrast and brightness of selected areas of the image, dodging and burning to reveal detail in the captured image. This also paid off in later versions when we implemented grayscale printing on PostScript printers. My favorite feature that I came up with for Thunderscan had to do with two-dimensional scrolling. Thunderscan documents could be quite large, so you could only show a portion of them in the image area of the window. You could scroll the image by dragging with a Mac Paint style hand scrolling tool, but you had to drag an awful lot to get to the extremes of a large image. I decided to add what I called inertial scrolling, where you gave the image a push and it kept scrolling at a variable speed in the direction of the push after the mouse button was released. I had to add some hysteresis to keep the image from moving accidentally and make various other tweaks, but soon I had it worked out and felt great to be able to zip around large images by pushing them. The hardest feature to perfect was bi-directional scanning. At first, Thunderscan only scanned from left to right, but it wasted time to return the scanner to the left after every scan line. We could almost double the speed if we scanned in both directions, but it was hard to get the adjacent scan lines that were scanned in opposite directions to line up properly. Ultimately, we made bi-directional scanning an optional feature, if you wanted to trade a little quality for greater speed. I finished the software in November of 1984 after taking a short break to work on something else. Thunderscan shipped in December of 1984 and did well in the very beginning, with sales gradually rising from around 1,000 units a month to over 7,500 units a month at its peak in 1987. For a while, it was both the least expensive and highest quality scanning alternative for the Macintosh, although I'm sure it frustrated a lot of users by being too slow. I did 3 major revisions of the software over the next few years, improving the scan quality and adding features like grayscale printing and eventually grayscale display for the Mac too. Eventually, the flatbed scanners caught up with Thunderscan and then surpassed it in both cost, quality, and convenience. Over its lifetime, Thunderscan sold approximately 100,000 units and improved countless documents by providing users with an inexpensive way to capture high-resolution graphics with their Macintoshes. Well, there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to me read it to you as much as I enjoyed reading it to you. I really love those folklore articles. I think that they really kind of open up like a door to a different time kind of in the development of all this stuff. It's just really interesting reading. So anyway, everybody have a wonderful evening. And as I always say, Apple II forever.